All right, to go. Okay. Right. So welcome back, guys. We're going to finish off today with this unit, which is 003, maintain workplace health and safety. Now, this is in most accredited courses, not most, but a lot of accredited courses. Okay. And if you're in a working environment, I do realise that you get workplace health and safety, sometimes called operational health and safety or occupational health and safety, to death. Okay, you do a lot of scenarios around it. You do a lot of toolbox stuff. If you're in certain industries, it's very heavy focus. You know, if you're in construction or other government things, very heavy focus on workplace health and safety. If you're not in the industry or working at the moment, it is something you do need to know. And the biggest thing I think you need to know is what your responsibilities are. And one of the biggest things I will say is that it's not just your organisation's responsibility to look after you. Yes, they have a responsibility, but you've got your own responsibility, and it's legislation. In most states, it's legislation, so you need to be familiar with it. I want you just to take a couple of minutes just to have a think about two things. What does work health and safety mean to you? If you could jot these down, and why you think you need to know about workplace health and safety in your role as an investigator. So take a couple of minutes just to have a think about that and write those down, and we'll have a bit of a talk about that. And for those online, please enter, if you can, if you want to, please enter your answers to those two questions in the chat. All right, we'll just have a bit of a talk. So I might start off with Paul. Are you able to just tell me a couple of things that people have said? No? One thing? All right. There's a chance to write it in. What does work health and safety mean to you? It can be one word. It can be a story if you like. You got anything, Paul?
Yeah, so I have here, so it's important to have a safe work environment to be in, to feel that you're safe in that environment when you're working in it, to reduce injury and illness, also to know that the company is complying with policy.
Okay.
And to get home safely to your family.
That's a good one. Get home safely. Fact is, everybody deserves to go to work and be safe. Now, without giving anything away, the two gents in the room will know workplace health and safety at the highest level, I think, because their jobs are fairly dependent on it. And so will some of yours. Anything to add? Like, what does WHS mean to you?
Yes, it's. I think in our workplace, it's about our safety, but also the amount of the people that we actually manage, because they've got a right to be safe as well.
Yep.
They may not be the top of the tree in regards to the community, but they're still entitled to be safe and cared for in the environment that they live.
Yep. Okay. All right. Good. Thank you. For me, workplace health and safety means being able to go to work and be safe and go home to your families. Because in the end, not getting all teary here, but in the end, life is about life and family and friends, not work, I don't think. Work's very important, of course, but you're entitled to be safe at work, but you've got to take your own responsibility for being safe. Why do we need to know this stuff as an investigator? Any ideas? Anything on the chat, Paul?
Why do we need to know it? I'm just looking through people's answers. So someone has said to keep it in the front of your mind, so it's always there. And also, I'm looking at someone's answer here, and I'm sort of changing a little bit, that guidelines, human nature is we like guidelines to work by. Even as a parent with kids, you know that your kids need guidelines, and adults need guidelines too to work by, and to know what they can and can't do. So that's another reason to have them.
Okay, thanks. All right, we'll keep entering those if something comes to your mind. But as an investigator, a private investigator working subcontract, you will be working by yourself, okay, all the time. Very, very rarely. Maybe if you're a surveillance investigator, you may be in a team, that's possible. But predominantly 90% of the time, 95 probably, you will be working by yourself. So you'll be out dealing with people who are hostile and angry. Okay, you may be getting a statement from an insurance claimant, for example, that is not happy. Why? Because they think their claim's going to get denied. They think you're the enemy and you're there to deny it. Now you're not. You're an investigator gathering information. So, you're going into people's homes. You're meeting them in environments which aren't familiar to you. You may be doing surveillance, so there's risk there. There's all sorts of risks, and we are going to talk a lot about hazards and risks. What I want you to think about when you're thinking about your job as an investigator are what are the main hazards and risks, and what plans do I have to deal with them. In the end, that's what workplace health and safety is all about. Okay, we've got a couple of videos in this presentation. Paul, if you switch over, we'll go to number 1.
Your health and safety obligations in the workplace. Every person who has any connection to a workplace has health and safety obligations. In this video, we will touch on the obligations of the different workplace groups. So what are the obligations of an employer? Well, an employer must, so far as is reasonably practicable, 1, provide and maintain for their employees an environment that is safe and without any risks to their health, and 2, ensure that people other than their employees are not exposed to any risks to their health and safety arising from the employer's undertaking. Both employees and any person who manages and controls a workplace must ensure that the workplace and any means of entering or leaving it are safe and create no health risks. What are the obligations of an employee? Well, while at work, an employee must 1, take reasonable care for their own health and safety, 2, take reasonable care for the health and safety of anyone who may be affected by their acts or omissions in the workplace, 3, cooperate with their employer with respect to any action to comply with any requirement imposed by health and safety law, and 4, while at work, not to intentionally or recklessly interfere with or misuse anything provided at the workplace in the interests of health and safety. It's important to remember that health includes both physical and psychological health. Your health and safety.
Okay, so that all makes sense. You've got an obligation as an employee, or if you're working for yourself, you've got an obligation to yourself and your family to maintain proper workplace health and safety. I think that's all fairly standard, goes without saying. We're going to go through, so there are 4 parts to this thing. First is how do you contribute to workplace procedures. We're talking about here identifying hazards and controlling risks. All you got to, if you take nothing else out of this whole presentation, remember workplace health and safety is about hazards and risks. That's and I'll explain to those. There's a pretty good video in a minute telling you exactly what they are, so you should know. Okay, so identify existing and potential hazards and recording them. Okay, so what do? Well, workplace legislation exists in every single state and it is different. Okay, it's fairly uniform across each state, but it governs what you should and shouldn't do in the workplace. For example, Queensland has Queensland Workplace Health and Safety Act, New South Wales, something similar, something named similar. They're all very similar things. Okay, but it's all about minimising hazards, identifying risks, and protecting yourself from both physical, but particularly now, and very prevalent, psychological harm. Okay, so WorkSafe Australia, which is a combination of all work health and safety agencies, last year released a report, and there were only four areas that rose in claims. Anyone want to have a guess at what the top one was? Back injuries? It's not, but good guess.
Mental health.
Mental health. Well, you're on the right track.
Bullying.
Bullying was number 2. Rose something like, I think, 6 or 7%. Not a massive rise. Slips from uneven ground or they classify all these different things, was like 3% or something. Well, you're on the right track, sort of. At 114% rise in 1 year in claims, you're not quite right, but close. I mean, unfortunately you fellas are subject to this all the time.
Yes.
Assaults on staff, okay? So if you're working in any sort of customer service environment, 114% rise in assaults. Now, why is that? Have a think about the world and how it is now. Have a think about the last 12 to 18 months. Have a think about road rage. Have a think about unpredictability of people out on the street you're dealing with. It's like society, okay? So, you know, if you're a PI out there doing work, people aren't going to necessarily like you, and they're just more and more angrier and angrier. I think that's society as a whole. So you need to be able to protect yourself. And how do we do that? Well, identifying hazards is an important function. Why? Again, because a hazard can be something that is going to turn into something that's going to harm you or your other employees as well. Okay, this is a pretty good video, and we show it because it's a really short, sharp snapshot of what the difference between a hazard and a risk are. So I really like you to take note. As I said, if nothing else, know the difference between these things.
What's the difference between a hazard and a risk? Easy question? Apparently not. There appears to be some confusion between the two. A hazard can be identified as anything which can cause harm. A risk is the potential that a hazard will cause harm. This ladder is a hazard. Climbing the ladder and falling off is a risk. This plane is a hazard. Flying the plane in a thunderstorm and crashing is a risk. This hammer is a hazard. Using it and injuring oneself is a risk. Okay, so now we understand the difference between a hazard and a risk. How then do we assess the specific risk that a hazard poses? First, we assess how likely it is that someone will be exposed to the hazard. The likelihood will depend upon the probability and the frequency of exposure to a hazard. We also assess the likely outcome, the severity or range of the potential consequences resulting from the hazard. An example, the hazard in this case is our poisonous black spider, contained in a closed jar. Rating the hazard, the spider, against the severity and probability scale, we'd most likely say the risk of harm to the person is minor and remote. Change the circumstances and the poisonous spider is outside the jar, we change the risk rating to probable and imminent danger. See you next time.
Okay, so I hope that sort of explains hazard and risk. You know, a plane might be a hazard, but what's the ultimate likelihood of you dying in a plane? Honestly, very, very low, I think. You're probably more likely to die crossing the road. But if you're going to cross the road, is that a significant risk or hazard? No, it's not. Okay, so, you know, if there was one of these cords, which are nicely out of the way here, across here and weren't taped down, that would be a hazard. What's the risk? Moderate, I would say, of me tripping over. Then what's the consequence? Me breaking my leg, etc. You get the idea. Okay, you're all adults, you know. And if you've been in any workplace, you know, you can walk through. I mean, we could walk through this building here, you could walk through your house and pick out 20 different hazards. But it's about applying, you know, that likelihood and consequence formula to it, and then having a plan. So if you're a PI, you've got lots of hazards. Let's think about what they are. We've talked about a few of them. Intolerant people, angry, abusive customers. If you're doing surveillance, there are hazards, aren't they? You might have exposure hazards. You might be sitting in a car for 8 hours and you've got a dehydration hazard. So you have to think about how you address all those. I mean, you know, there's got to be a fair bit of nous, I think. Nous is one of those traits we talked about an investigator should have. Nous, if you don't know, means common sense, which apparently isn't very common anymore. But, you know, if you're going to surveil someone, there are certain risks. The risks are people being surveilled, don't really like it. You know, no one likes being followed and watched without their consent. But if you're licensed to do so, that's your job. Well, how are you going to deal with getting caught? Okay? And I can't tell you in exactly every situation how you would deal with that. That's something you're going to have to learn. But again, what Paul was talking about, getting coaching, mentoring and all that sort of stuff will show you how to deal with those sort of things. Okay, so how do we contribute to the development of strategies for implementing risk controls? Okay, what is a risk control? It's a way that methods are implemented in a workplace, in your case as a PI, to minimise or eliminate the threat of hazard. So, okay, if your threat of hazard as a PI is aggressive, angry or uncooperative people, how are you going to minimise the risk to yourself? While I'm talking, have a think about any ideas about how you would do that. Do you carry a gun, a baton? Both those things are illegal, by the way, unless you're licensed. No, you don't. Okay. Do you do certain things? Do you practice safe distance from people? Do you not go into people's homes if there's some feeling that, you know, there's some unpredictability there? So these are sort of things that you need to assess. And you need to recognise that risk management strategies always need to be reviewed and changed. If you're in a workplace, it's important to participate in managing risk. Okay, it's not just one person's, not the organisation's responsibility. It's yours too. If you're walking through a workplace and you see a puddle of water in the kitchen, do you just walk past it and go, not my problem? Well, I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but it sort of is your problem if you've identified it. So then the next step is, and this is at a basic level, I mean the puddle on the ground that the lady slipped over in the supermarket that we watched before is at the basic level. Like, how many people walk past that? If you're a customer, that's fine, but if you're a workplace, if you're in a workplace, a supermarket, Stark's supermarket or whatever it was, and you saw that and didn't do anything about it, well, you're probably liable because you didn't manage the risk, you did nothing, which is at the simplest, most basic level. Contain it, put something over it, mop it up, get rid of it. There's lots of different ways to manage it. Okay, risk controls in line with the hierarchy of risk controls. Now, what's the hierarchy of risk? You'll see here, this is what it looks like. Okay, so these are all the things you can do in terms of controlling risk. Okay, all the way from personal protective equipment. So if you're a private investigator, PI, you need to think about your personal protective equipment. There might not be much involved with that. Administrative controls are about the way you work. So if you're a PI, it might be about where you park, where you're going to meet people, how you're going to even communicate with people. Your ability to de-escalate conflict is another, you know, that's a training thing, that's a risk control. Engineering controls, it's about isolating people from the hazard. Substitution, always the best, okay? So best example is, you know, a puddle on the ground, mop it up, it's gone. You've substituted, or you've eliminated, you've physically reduced it completely. So that's just some things you need to know. Workplace Health and Safety Acts have all this information into it, and you know, it would be pretty boring, frankly, for us to go through the details of every act and all the stuff that's in workplace health and safety. But certainly familiarise yourself with your own state or territory's act and be aware of the basics of it. And if you go to any, you know, you jump on the internet, and this is what I talked about before, being an investigator, it's not just taking stuff in, you know, there is an onus on you to go and find stuff out. Jump on your particular state or territory's workplace health and safety agency. In Queensland, it's WorkSafe. Well, it doesn't matter what, they all start with work and safety in them. I think WorkSafe Victoria. Jump on there, and what you will find there is a massive amount of resources about everything to do with occupational health and safety, videos, all sorts of stuff. So you need to familiarise yourself with those sort of things. Okay, how do you identify and report issues with risk controls in line with policy and also legislation. Okay, some risks can't be eliminated, can they? Now let's have a think about what risks can't be eliminated. Dealing with hostile people, it's pretty hard. You've got to, if you're a PI, you've got to deal with people that aren't really happy. You've got to deal with people that might be very sensitive, have made some sort of claim or something. They're not in a good way. They might be disabled in some way. They may have had some other experience. Okay, you're the enemy, or you can be. So you can't necessarily eliminate risk. There's lots of risks that you just can't eliminate completely. There are a few different ways to monitor risk though. One is reviewing policy and procedure. Other thing is to be involved, and this is sort of more talking about if you're in a workplace situation, not necessarily as a lone PI, okay? Things like being participative in workplace health and safety. So in organisations there's lots of things around like committees. We have workplace health and safety reps. You've got people that go around and do audits and all this sort of stuff. These are all important roles in workplace health and safety, but never forget that it's everyone's responsibility, including yours. So it's important also to create an environment, particularly if you're in an organisation, where feedback and consultation is encouraged. Okay, and that's what workplace safety is all about. It's about having a say. No one should be discriminated against, or I'm sure lots of you have probably got horror stories about this, but discriminated against or adverse action against for speaking up about something in relation to workplace health and safety. Okay, procedures and policy are always big in this sort of space, and you can, we could go through 100 of these, but think about any procedure, emergency procedure, fire. Okay, if the fire drill alarm went off here, what would we do? Okay, who would be the fire warden? Where's the emergency exits? If there are emergency exits, where's the meet-up points? All these sort of things you need to think about. If you're working in customer service at a service station, for example, what are the procedures if someone comes in and puts a shotgun in your face? Okay, that's why, I mean, a lot of times when you work in an organisation, policy and procedures seem very boring and mundane, but it's generally there for a good reason. And if you're a PI, you sort of got to do this stuff yourself. You've got to have these plans. I'm not saying you work for yourself, you sit down and do your own policy, the Gregory Lamy policy on if someone gets upset with me when I'm interviewing them. But it's about having those plans, okay? Fire, evacuation, armed hold-up, hostile customers. There's a whole plethora of different things that can happen. You can go to some countries where they've probably got earthquake procedures, and all this sort of stuff. So it depends on the situation. Okay, implementing policies and procedures into your work team processes. So again, this is more about if you're in an organisation, okay? Not particularly that relevant. How do you provide information about policies and procedures? Well, training and education, toolbox talks, directors' instructions, information from work safety agencies, things like modelling safety behaviours, written documentations, we talked about them, policies and procedures, things like posters. I mean, everybody has seen, have they not, the lift with your legs poster. They were big in the 80s and 90s. They're still around, some of them. But nowadays, what you're seeing is different. You're seeing posters in the workplace about bullying, harassment, sexual harassment, all that sort of stuff. So there's been a real shift. Doesn't mean you shouldn't lift with your legs anymore, but that's become so ingrained in people that, that's what you do. You go into any construction site and see how many posters and stuff there are about it. And they all contribute to a good, positive health and safety environment. So if you are in an organisation, think about the sort of ways your organisation maintains the consultation with everybody and gets that word out about health and safety, whether it's physical or psychological. Rights and responsibilities in the workplace. PCBU. I only bring this up because it is a short answer question, I think. What is a PCBU? What does this mean? Well, I will tell you what it stands for. It's a person conducting a business or undertaking. You go, okay, that means basically nothing to me. And it doesn't mean much to me either, but what is a PCBU? the organisation or the boss. Okay. So workers, contractors, officers, visitors, volunteers to sites, they can all come under, they all have responsibilities and rights and responsibilities under workplace health and safety in the workplace. Okay. PCBUs, as I said, the boss, the organisation, have responsibilities to keep you safe, okay, and they don't always do that, all right, but you have responsibility for even somebody that comes in to, if you work in an office, comes in as a volunteer, the cleaner. Everybody's got responsibilities. It's not just the organisation's responsibility under the law. Let's have a little bit of a think, and I would like some feedback here. Now take a couple of minutes to jot down, if you're in a workplace, what are the sort of hazards that you come across? Now I know the gents here have got like 1,000 of them, so they'll do me for quite a few. Have a think about where you work and what are the sort of hazards, or what are the main hazards, I guess is what I'm asking. So give me 2 or 3 of the main hazards to you in your workplace in relation to occupational health and safety. Just take a couple of minutes to jot those down. Okay. All right, so we've got a couple of responses. I'll start with any one of you two gents. What are your main, maybe your top 3 hazards in your workplace?
Assaults, needle stick injuries.
Yep. Yep. Okay, so assaults, needle sticks and blood spills. We're all getting a picture of what you blokes do. If you haven't worked it out, you're not a real good investigator. Same thing.
Some of the hazards we got, because we're so old, is stairwells, the old silk doors, the metal gates.
Yep.
They cause a lot of injuries.
Yeah, okay. All right. Okay. All right, what have we got, Paul? You got to, I noticed I did read slips and falls and those sort of things. They're always in the top 3 generally, depending on where you work.
Stairs and chemicals, seizures, falls, medication, forklift, manual handling and chemicals, people, spilling food and drinks, leaving a mess, fires, overcrowded rooms in nursing home, angry and substance-fueled clients, biological, physical, chemical, ergonomic and assault, air conditioners being clogged, and everything that goes along with that.
Okay, so well look, so depending on where you work, there's different hazards. If you're a nurse in a public hospital, imagine the hazards that you're facing, not only from the patients that come in, but all the biological hazards, COVID, all those sort of things. Whereas you're on a construction site, a major construction site, have a think about the sort of hazards you're going to get there, things falling on you, and how do you risk manage that. Again, if you're an investigator, you need to think about the sort of hazards that you're going to come across, and how you're going to deal with it. So have more of a bit of a think about those sort of things and how you would deal with them. So providing information about identified hazards and the outcome of risk assessments is the next thing. So legislations require that organisations do what's called, now you'll hear this a bit, it probably is in some of your material, reasonably practicable. Okay, so what does that mean? Good question. What does reasonably practical mean? It means an organisation is not going to completely eliminate every risk to you. Okay, they've got a legislative responsibility to reasonably, as far as practical, reduce the risk. So this is a bit of a bone in contention because some industries, some places are good at this and some aren't. I mean, workplace health and safety and minimising risk costs money. Okay, that shouldn't be a thing, but typically it is. So if you're on a construction site and your boss is not providing you with hard hats, that would be pretty negligible, I would have thought. Okay, if you're somewhere where you need gloves because you've got needle stick injuries, you're not getting provided with that, well, I'd suggest that's probably not reasonably practical on their terms. So the Act does say that you must do, the organisations must do what's reasonably practical to protect you. Doesn't take responsibility off you. You've got to remember that. There can be lots of barriers to what's reasonably practical. Cost is one big one. Okay, it shouldn't be, but cost is a big factor with everything. Management support, okay. Some industries, some workplaces are very highly workplace health and safety focused, and some aren't, okay. Yours may not be, I'm not sure. If you look at the construction industry, very highly workplace health and safety focused, okay. Highly unionised, and that's all good because people get killed on construction sites. Lack of training or understanding. So if you're not training people how to do things properly, then there's a risk there, okay. It's not like investigated not being trained, not being able to take a statement properly. There's not a lot of risk there, okay. It's be like, you know, sending somebody out in a car to do a follow, surveillance. We'll talk about that in a few days, and only haven't just got their licence. There's a bit of a risk there, isn't there, because they're not really experienced at driving. Time is another one. Are there any others? Does anybody know any other issues or barriers in their organisation? You fellas will probably have some to workplace health and safety or compliance with it. Laziness is one, okay. Reluctance, why? Reluctance was the answer?
Reluctance. I actually dealt with one where management wanted to just put an issue aside and just refused to deal with it.
Yeah.
Until it was brought to the fore to the point where I was the union chairman, actually threatened to walk out and take all the staff with me.
Yep.
Until they addressed the issue, because they just let it slide for 3 years and no one wanted to deal with it because it was a big issue. So they just tried to just hide it away so no one dealt with it.
Yeah, okay. Mm-hmm. So reluctance, any more coming through? No? All right. So
Someone's just said stubbornness.
yeah, okay. Yeah, because look, some organisations are reluctant and stubborn. They don't want to face up. They don't, you know, they do the minimum that they have to do under the law, I guess. But ultimately, that really can come back to bite.
And lack of resources,
Yes.
which means lack of equipment.
Yes. Okay. Complacency, yeah.
So they would know it all, but they'd know that it's there.
Mm.
But then they say for a needle stick injury, they might put their hand somewhere where they can't see, which we taught not to do those kind of things. So complacency is actually
Absolutely, yeah, that's a good point. Complacency is a big one. We talk, you know, we do not during this course talk to things like situational awareness, but depending on what industry you're on, that's a massive risk control. So being situationally aware, being aware of what's around you, there is more to it than that, by the way, can be a massive risk control in terms of that. But complacency is one, laziness. That's more of an individual thing, I would say, because you're in a routine job doing the same thing day in and day out, and you one day don't do what you should have, and you can end up getting hurt. But there are lots of different barriers within an organisation. The main ones I find are cost and time and complacency. And in Australia, we say she'll be right, okay? But she ain't always right. Things like safe housekeeping, what are they? They are just simple keeping things free of things like clutter, removing trip hazards. These are all pretty simple. Using the proper equipment, fixing broken equipment. Safe housekeeping is like that example of walking past and seeing a puddle and saying, she'll be right, don't worry about it, someone else will clean it up. Okay, so everyone's responsibility is to make sure, you know, the risks are minimised. Checklists and safety audits, okay, these are things everybody hates doing, okay, but they're there for a reason. They're there to identify risks for a start. So if you're in an organisation and you know, such and such is walking around with a tick and flick, and there's a reason for that. It's not just done for no reason. It's to identify any hazards. That's the whole point of it. Monitoring housekeeping practices to ensure that the policies are followed. How do you make sure that proper housekeeping policies are followed? Well, good procedures and policies being in place are the way to do that. But it's also very highly consultative. So if you're in an organisation and you can get involved in workplace health and safety on a committee or as a rep or a union rep or whatever, that's really important because it's not just the boss's problem. It's about engaging employees, setting goals, communicating, rewarding, ongoing learning and development. Okay, it's about fixing problems. So Paul and I both teach also the Cert 4 in government, and what we do is talk to, well, the main people we teach for that are local government across generally Queensland, New South Wales, okay? So we're talking people like your rangers, your local laws officers, parking officers. Now imagine their risks, no one likes them, okay? People like environmental health officers, all those sort of compliance and investigation people. And ongoing learning to how to do their jobs is very important to keeping them safe. There's different types of workplace health and safety audits. Again, you don't need to get caught up in these sort of things, but there's internal audits, there's compliance audits in relation to legislation, hazard-specific audits, or management system audits as well. So incident reports are generally required under law, and some of you may have been familiar with things like what they call near-miss reporting, okay, and wonder, well, why do we need to report on something that didn't even happen? It seems a bit, unless you really think about it, and I'll tell you in a minute, unless you really think about it, you think, well, why are we wasting our time? So it didn't happen, so let's not worry about it and move on. Okay, near-miss reporting is very important because what it does is it builds a picture about a hazard that's becoming worse. Okay, does that make sense? So that's why it's important, and those who analyse these sort of reports can, if there's lots of near-miss reports in relation to something, well, they can take action to minimise the risk as well. They often are reportable to another organisation. For example, someone goes off with a psychological injury, that's reportable to work cover, typically. So work cover may investigate that. And that's an area that you can also move into as work cover investigation if you're so inclined. Police as well, if somebody's killed, okay, can become not necessarily a police matter, although I say that most states have workplace manslaughter laws now, where they never used to. But police aren't typically involved in work health and safety matters, but if someone dies it becomes a matter for the coroner, and that's if you don't know, the police act on behalf of the coroner. So it may be reportable, normally to your particular state or territory's work health and safety agency by law, or the police or another agency. We've talked about near misses, but they're also a very big and important function as well. Okay, this is the Northern Territory. I don't think we've got anybody from the NT here, unfortunately. I was up there recently, but this is about understanding incident notification. No, it's not. I'm not showing that, Paul. Good work. Okay, we will get that and show that to you later. All right, let's talk about support, consultation, cooperation and communication. That's what it's all about in relation to workplace health and safety. So any Workplace Health and Safety Act, and they'll all be generally the same across states and territories, requires the PCBU or the organisation / the boss to communicate with its employees about work health and safety. That's a legislative thing. So the process is very consultative in nature. There's a good reason for that. Why? Because those on the ground doing the job know what the risks and hazards are, not necessarily those people that are not exposed to those risks and hazards, okay? And that's why it is important, if you are in an organisation working, that you identify risks and hazards. There's no point identifying them, knowing them, not reporting them or being consultative about them, because that helps no one, okay? Again, everyone's responsibilities. Organisations can consult with employees in many ways. What are they? Well, we've talked about a few of these. Health and safety reps, okay? Audits, investigating incidents. Another thing that this course will bring out, or should bring out in you, is your ability to do safety investigations. Won't make you a safety investigator, by the way. There's lots of different things you need to do for that, but the main tenets of being a good investigator are across the board no matter where you are. So safety investigations are really quite good to get involved in because they typically follow a very structured process, okay? We can talk more about that. Staying up to date with safety information, consulting with management, of course, and working with staff members. It's very important that workplace health and safety, near misses, incidents, reports, all that sort of thing are kept in report form, and there's a picture built up about what's happening. They are talking about hazards and incident reports, inspections, meeting notes, work toolbox talks, any promotional material. It's very important, maintenance reports, etc. If you look at maintenance reports on any piece of equipment, if you've got that in your organisation, again, they're not just done for the sake of it. They're done so the maintenance can be looked at, particularly if something goes wrong. How do you assist, encourage work members to contribute to WHS? Well, I think we've already talked about this. So get involved in committees if you can. Get involved in being a rep if you can. It's all about consultation. Okay, here we've got this video.
We all know that good communication at work can increase morale and productivity. But do you know that consulting with workers is required by law? At the centre of a healthy and safe workplace is great consultation with those who do the work. And that is why it is a requirement in the Work Health and Safety Act 2011. Sounds simple, right? Yet our customers tell us that they are not sure how to consult. They are worried it could be time-consuming and need some help getting started. The good news is, it doesn't have to be, and Safe Work can help. So what is workplace consultation? Consultation is simply talking to your workers about safety. It's a two-way exchange between you and your workers, where you talk to each other about health and safety issues that affect your workplace. Examples might be when buying new equipment or working out the best way to deal with traffic management on site. Listen to health and safety issues and share concerns, ideas and solutions. Exchange information to improve health and safety. Take input from workers before making decisions about health and safety. Workers can include contractors, volunteers, trainees, labour hire and employees. When should consultation happen? You must consult with workers when identifying hazards and managing risks, proposing changes that affect the health and safety of workers, introducing or reviewing work procedures, making decisions about workplace facilities and the welfare of workers, or resolving disagreements over health and safety issues. What are your options? You can be flexible in the way you set up your consultation arrangements. It's about finding out what works best for your business and your workers. The most important thing to remember is to talk to your workers and together decide on the best approach for your workplace. One option is to elect a health and safety representative, otherwise known as an HSR. The HSR ensures information about health and safety flows easily between workers and employers. Another option is to establish a health and safety committee. These committees bring workers and employers together to work collaboratively to improve health and safety. If these options aren't suitable, you and your workers might decide to agree on other methods, such as toolbox talks, briefing sessions, face-to-face discussions, or meetings. You have set up your consultation approach. Now what? Whatever approach you choose, it's a good idea to take some notes on what happened. It helps to ensure everyone involved is clear on what was discussed and agreed to. They can be as simple as recording things such as who is involved, what the safety matter is, what decisions have been made, what action is to be taken, who is to take action, and when the action has been completed. You should also review your consultation methods on a regular basis. Your business changes, so your consultation methods will too. There are always ways to improve. What are the benefits? Besides being a legal requirement, talking to your workers about health and safety is a sensible approach. A safer workplace is easier to achieve when everyone in the workplace communicates with one another and works together to find solutions. And drawing on the knowledge of your workers can mean more informed decisions can be made about how to work safely, and everyone is committed. But good consultation also impacts the bottom line of your business. Improved safety leads to fewer injuries and illnesses. This could lead to less time off work for injured workers, a more productive workplace, and reduced claims costs.
The practical assessment for this unit basically is to determine 6 hazards. So, look, again, if you're not working, you can easily determine 6 hazards in your house. Okay, you determine more than that. I could walk around here and get 60 probably. So, you know, lots of people are working from home now, and there's lots of hazards. Okay, so it's to determine 6 hazards. 3 of those have got to be reported in relation to this template that we've produced. So what you'll see if you open it up, you should have all of those. This particular example, date of plan, whatever it is, what the location is. So if it is your home and you're working from home, for all purposes you may be, and who's the person in control. The 6 hazards here in this one is cleaning chemicals. The second one is sharp knives, stand-up desks, high desks, etc. Staff fridges left with alcohol in them after Friday night. That's interesting. Poorly maintained emergency call registers, and team members working from home. So look, you won't get this wrong. You just need to, the purpose of this exercise is to identify the hazards. Okay, if you have any problems, let us know. Then you need to apply what risk level they are. And again, that's up to you. We can't, you won't get this wrong, but just apply that analysis in terms of, all right, you know, staff fridges left with alcohol in them after Friday night drinks, what's the risk level? Low. Okay. The next thing is, what are the agreed actions or response procedures? So again, have a think about, this is how you're going to deal with the risk. Okay. Again, you won't get this wrong, but have a go at analysing what the hazard is, what the consequence rating is, and how you're going to fix it. That's really all. Yes, Paul.
Just to add to that, just so you can work out the risk, when you actually go into the assessment, you will see there is a table there that you use. So you've got your table of the high, low, and will it happen. So just use that table to figure out what those figures are going to be in filling that table out.
Yeah. Okay. And the rest, person responsible, target date, completed. That's just for you to fill in. It's not that important. You can make up whoever. If you are in an organisation, try and do that for the organisation. Okay. And that's it. That's about hazard identification and risk and filling in the template. Okay. The next thing you need to do on 3 occasions, correct me if I'm wrong, Paul, 3 occasions, is to actually drill down on those particular hazards and fill in the next template, which you will see. Okay. So they've got things like how did you provide this information to stakeholders? Okay. This risk was the first aid action plan. Okay, who were the stakeholders? Again, there's no right or wrong answers typically for this. What you could have done better, any additional comments, etc. Okay, so that's, you've identified the hazards, then you drill down a bit, and this is the risk plan. Okay, so you're going to complete it as if you'd done it. Now, I'm not expecting you to actually go out and do it, but you know what you've done. Just have a think about how you'd address that risk and the sort of things, and then how you'd report it. Hazard 2 in the same sort of thing. Yeah, we don't really need. You'll have all. These are all examples of how to fill it out. Okay. What's this one, Paul?
So, what does it say up the top, Greg? I can't. Unfortunately, I've got the same what these guys have got, and it's gone blurry on me. So, and I don't have the copy.
Step 5, providing information to other stakeholders. So,
yeah, so
again, look, these templates are really just follow the bouncing ball.
Yeah, it's you're just showing. Once again, as Greg said, it's a mock. You're not actually doing this, but it's your mock. These templates are a mock of how you are going to implement the strategy for the workplace incident or risk that you've identified. So you're just going through this and showing there's different templates for different things. So this is notifying stakeholders. There's another one on delivery, on if you're going to deliver it to other workers, how you're going to deliver it. And I think that's about it. There's a couple of templates there. So it's all about how you're going to inform your stakeholders, how you're going to deliver this news to them, get the word out there. So I just want you to go through that, fill out those templates, how you're going to do that.
So the rest of the templates are really just fill out You know, after you've identified the hazard, applied a plan to risk, reported on it, then just fill out the rest in accordance with what you would do. We can send you 2 fellas these. No worries. Step 5, role play emergency response. Again, make up a simulated emergency, what stakeholders were involved, what your process was, resources. You can pretty well go off the guide, the one we've supplied you. Incident report form is step 6. So again, this is filling in a form. Okay, so imagine an incident, fill in what happened. Okay, in this case, casualty was slicing ham and cut a finger on the blunt knife. Okay, etc. You know, fill in the rest. Again, difficult to get this sort of activity wrong, as long as you have a go and fill in as much as you can. Okay. That is basically workplace health and safety. I do encourage you to read the unit guide. I do also very much encourage you to jump on your state or territory's WorkSafe website. Easy enough to find, just Google it and have a good look through. There's probably, you know, there'd be a dozen different really good videos that I could show you in relation to workplace health and safety, which really hit home, I think, the importance of it, because you don't always realise it. You know, occupational health and safety does become a mundane, run through the mill type of thing, but it's vitally important for you as an investigator working alone that you know the risks to you and you're able to identify and have a plan to deal with them.